Okay, I have no business to discuss, so unless you need something from me, let's get started on physiology. Nothing? Great. Okay. Today we're going to be talking about a very important topic in the field of physiology, and that's fluid balance. We're going to be using two equations today. One you should remember from physics is Ohm's law, where the flow rate equals the change in pressure over the radius. And we're also going to be talking about Starling's law of ultrafiltration, which says that the flow across the capillaries is equal to the permeability coefficient times the hydrostatic pressure plus the oncotic pressure, hydrostatic pressure of the capillaries plus the oncotic pressure of the interstitial fluid, minus the hydrostatic pressure of the interstitial tissue plus the oncotic pressure of the capillaries. Okay, now the best way to study physiology is to look at experiments that have already been done. So today, hopefully you brought your textbooks. We're going to be looking at several experiments that were done using frogs, where solutions containing different drugs were perfused through the circulatory system of the frogs to monitor the effects in both flow rate and the weight of the frog. Okay, so in order to understand what's going on in these cases, we need to first look at the different signaling pathways that exist in the smooth muscle cells of the lining of the blood vessels, leading to the capillaries. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is the GQ pathway. The GQ protein, when activated, activates PLC, which cleaves PIP2 into DAG and IP3. IP3 acts positively on the IP3R receptor, which increases the release of calcium into the cytoplasm. DAG, on the other hand, acts positively on PKC, which acts positively on the membrane calcium channel to increase the influx of calcium from the extracellular fluid. And it also acts negatively on the potassium channel to decrease the outflux of potassium. The net effect of these events is an increase in intracellular calcium. Now we're going to be moving on to talk about the Can we continue? Okay, great. Thank you. A reminder to everyone to please turn off your cell phones. Okay, where were we before I was interrupted? Oh, that's right, the GS pathway. Okay, when the GS protein is activated, it acts positively on adenylate cyclase, which converts ATP into cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP then activates PKA. PKA has two effects. First of all, it acts positively on MLCP, which dephosphorylates myosin, and acts negatively on MLCK, which would usually phosphorylate myosin. The net effect of these events is an increase in the amount of unphosphorylated myosin, which would then give us relaxation of the smooth muscle. Okay, how are we doing? Obviously not so well, because the blank stares I'm getting are reminding me of the dead fish at Ralph's Fish Market. Let's start with this. Does anyone have, let's see, can you give me names of certain drugs that you know are used to treat cardiovascular disease? And together we can work through how those drugs would affect this system and therefore the fluid balance in the capillaries. Anyone? Yes.
What pathway does the drug adenosine work on?
Okay, well let's think about that. We see in the results that you have in front of you that adenosine causes both an increase in drip rate and an increase in the weight of the frog. So in that case, we will assume that it is acting predominantly on the A to A receptors of adenosine, although it must be noted that adenosine acts on 4 different receptors, but we're going to take the results that we have and use those to conclude what receptors are being acted on. So, using the A to A receptor is attached to the GS protein pathway. So now I'm going to have you explain to me how that leads to the results that we see.
Well, the GS pathway would cause relaxation of the smooth muscle in the arteriole and This would cause the radius to increase, and according to the Ohm's law, the increase in radius would decrease resistance, which would then increase the flow in the capillary. And as for the weight, the increase in radius will allow for a greater volume to occupy the capillary bed, and the greater volume would increase the hydrostatic pressure in the capillary, which would push fluid from the capillary and into the interstitial tissue, which would then cause an increase in weight.
Okay, good, great, we're getting it. Are there any other drugs that we want to talk about today?
Yeah. What would happen if what would happen if ADH was used? Or
Well, gosh, let's think about that one. ADH binds to the V1 receptor, which, unlike the A2A receptor for adenosine, is coupled to the GQ pathway. So now I will ask you, based on what we've learned so far, what effects you would expect.
Well, I think with if it activates the GQ pathway, then eventually you're going to get the myosin head phosphorylated, and so you're going to be able to see contraction in the smooth muscle. And so if it was in the arterial smooth muscle, then you would see a decrease in radius in the vessel, and so you would actually increase the resistance to flow in that vessel and basically decrease flow overall. As far as the weight goes, because you've decreased the radius again and you decrease the flow, there's less fluid that enters the capillary, and so PC would be less, and you would see more fluid flow from the interstitial fluid, to the capillary. And so.
Okay, great. You're getting it. Good.
I have a question about histamine. I read that in the textbook it says that H1 receptors activate both vasodilation and vasoconstriction, and I'm a little confused about that because I don't know how that would happen. Is it vasodilation or is it vasoconstriction?
Yes. Your colleague here has made an excellent observation. Both answers are actually correct. Histamine causes both vasoconstriction and vasodilation. The H1 receptors, which histamine binds to, are located. Excuse me? Okay. See, when you're talking, I can't hear myself think. Okay? If you want to take your conversations outside, that's fine. I don't mind. You can come back in when you're finished. But I know it's my problem. It's something I've had to deal with for a long time. But if you could please just accommodate me and save your conversations for later, I'd appreciate it. Okay? Great. Thank you. Let's see. Back to the H1 receptors. Okay? H1 receptors are present on both the smooth muscle cells and the endothelial cells. So when the histamine binds to the H1 receptors on these smooth muscle cells, we see contraction by the GQ pathway. However, when histamine binds to the H1 receptors on the endothelial cells, we see instead relaxation. Relaxation of the endothelial cells in the capillaries causes an increase in K, which would increase the flow across the capillary bed. This could either be into or out of the tissue. Binding these receptors also increases the release of nitric oxide, which diffuses to nearby smooth muscle cells to cause dilation. In effect, we could see either vasoconstriction or vasodilation, depending on which effect outweighs the other. And if you look at your results, we actually see that the changes seen with the addition of histamine are not as drastic as what we see with the other drugs. Okay, and if we think about that, we can see that, we note that that is caused by the fact that we have both constriction and relaxation happening at the same time, or dilation. And the net effect is a not as drastic effect in the results that we see. Okay, great. I think we will stop there today. We're running out of time, but we will pick up where we left off on Thursday. Please study the pathways, and we will see you soon. Okay, great.